Hello, Danny. Welcome. Thank you so much for joining us today.
My pleasure. I'm really excited to be here.
Absolutely. So we're going to start with the basics. Can you tell us what is GA4 and why is Google replacing Universal Analytics?
So Google Analytics 4, or GA4, is Google's latest foray into analytics. We know about Universal Analytics, or just traditional Google Analytics. It's been around for years. I forgot to check out when it first came out. But we've been using the same free analytics package for years. Came on Google and said, okay, it's time for an upgrade. Usually when you have upgrades, right, you take a system and then make some changes here and there. But really what it did is it literally came along and blasted out of the water and came with something totally new. Now, it wasn't totally new because it's actually built upon Firebase and Google's mobile analytics platform. But for the average web user, have something that's totally new. So the question is why? And the reason is because when we look at where the internet is going, or just where the web is going, and I think it's already kind of gone there, but no longer do people just go to websites. But there's websites, there's mobile applications, and the traversing between those two properties happens quite often. So Google's looking at an ecosystem, or an analytic ecosystem, where it's a lot easier to track what's going on in multiple places. Universal analytics, or traditional analytics, were more about just for websites. GA4 is built more on it's on the mobile platform, but now it's basically a analytic package that will work well both for universal. It's an analytic platform that will work well both for websites and for mobile apps.
Really interesting. And you talked a little bit about the history. Google Analytics came out just around 10 years ago. I think it was 2012. It's used by over half of websites, according to some statistics that I've seen. So we're talking about tens of millions of websites that are using Universal Analytics and suddenly having to be, or forced to be, moving to this new platform. So a lot of marketers are nervous about it, frustrated with Google for this. But as you mentioned, there's a reasoning behind it, right? And a big part of that push is because of this mobile first world where, multiple devices. And you mentioned how Firebase, Google's original kind of mobile analytics platform, which they expanded into a lot more around mobile development, is kind of the foundation of that. So why is it important to know about GA4 today? Is there a deadline coming up that people need to know about? Hint, hint.
Yes. It's really, really important because Google Analytics 4 is going to be the only way that you're going to be able to measure your website starting July 1st, 2023, which at the time of this recording, we're about 2 months away, approximately. So what does that mean? That means that your universal analytics, your analytics that you're used to using, that is going to stop tracking data on July 1st. Of 2023. And what's crazy, Moshe, is yesterday we actually found out when that data will go away completely. So Google has been kind, has given us a whole nother year. So we'll have that old data available all the way through July 1st of 2024. And I guess we can talk later about what do we do with that. But getting back to the original question is, so what you're used to using is no longer going to be available. And whether you like it or not, you're going to have to start using Google Analytics 4 to track your website data or mobile app data, depending on what you're using it for.
Yeah. And a lot of us were kind of hoping that Google would push back that date, but it sounds like they're moving forward with that transition. And you said it's the only way, but just to clarify, there are other applications, there are other web analytics tools that are out there besides for Google's Universal Analytics or GA4. Perhaps we're going to do another episode at a later date about some of those alternatives that are available. But again, Google Analytics is by far the most popular because it's free and it's very robust and it integrates well with, Google Search Console, Google Ads, et cetera. So certainly very applicable to many site owners and business owners. So let's dive into some of the differences between UA, Universal Analytics, and GA4. What are the first things that you'll notice as a user when you sign into GA4? What functionality is missing, or what new functionality is being introduced?
So before we jump there, I think let's go more into like the theoretical. And when I say theoretical, it's like we have to understand like the basis. So um, the difference between Universal and GA4 is with regards to the difference between session-based and event-based analytics. So in other words, and that kind of sounds complicated, but what it means is that Universal Analytics or analytics we're used to, it's all based on session-based. You come to a website, where did you come from? You get there, you do a couple things, and then you leave. So out of the box, it's really great. But if I want to know individual things that I do during that session, what videos I clicked on, what button or what videos did I watch, what buttons have I clicked on, that you kind of had to actually go, and it was more complicated. It wasn't out of the box. But to understand traversing between the different pages on the website and how much time and so on and so forth, that was great. So that's session-based. When we move to Google Analytics 4, no longer is it session-based, it's event-based. And event-based means all events are equal. There's no difference between visiting a page, which now is an event, versus clicking on a button. And it's tracking all of those things. And it's tracking a lot of things out of the box. So you can easily track user behavior based on specific clicks, people scrolling through the page, and other interactions. And therefore, in that change, a lot of the nomenclature that we're used to is a little bit different. Where I find certain things is a little bit different. But at its core, I know some people, there's two ways of looking. One is, the world that we're used to has gone away and it's going to be so difficult. Or it's more like, wow, here's this platform that now is tracking a lot of things out of the box, and you can get so many more insights than you could before.
Yeah, you reminded me of that video someone put out this week or last week. It's like a horror movie trailer about GA4. I thought it was really funny. People are nervous about it, but my understanding and the little bit that I've played around with it, and to be honest, that I haven't fully immersed myself in learning everything about it. Again, hoping that they would kick the can down the road and not force us to move just yet. But what it seems like the biggest difference is from a user perspective, and I'm glad that you pointed out the fundamental underlying difference of how the data is structured around events as opposed to sessions. But from a user's perspective, it seems that where UA had a lot of predefined reports and visualizations that were there for you, now it seems like you can do most of, and potentially even more than you could have in the previous application, but the work's on you to set those up. Is that right?
You're 1,000% correct. And there is an interesting parable, or I guess example, that a guy called Andy Crestodina that I saw recently, and he compares it to the difference between IKEA and Home Depot. Universal Analytics or Original Analytics, IKEA, it's great. You walk through, you get what you need. It's perfect. But Home Depot, like, there's no instructions, but you have everything that you could ever imagine in order to build whatever you want. And that's really what we're dealing with over here.
Fascinating. So can we talk a little bit more about the events versus session, right? And how does user play into that, right? Because a user can have multiple sessions, can also have multiple events. So can you kind of unpack that a little bit as well?
Sure. So in general, when you break down GA4, we have different types of events. We have user events, session events, and then kind of like general overall events, or I think, yeah. So user events are going to be specific events that are related to a user, and no matter what's happening, no matter which session. So imagine if a user comes multiple times to a website, we're going and we want to pull reports based on that individual. We're not limited to that separate, the different sessions that he's come there, but we could look at data from a user perspective. So interestingly enough, and I think this is an important thing, especially for marketers, is you'll notice that when you're going into some of the reporting, there'll be like user source or session source. And at first glance, that's kind of confusing because it's like, what's the difference between user source, session source? And you'll see there's like user medium, session medium. And the answer is that typically when it came to Universal Analytics and you pulled up or you opened up a regular report, The default attribution model for that was last click. And what that means is, someone could have come to a website multiple times, but the person who's going to get the credit, or the source that's going to credit, is that last thing that brought them there. And there's problems with that model because that overly looks at the last thing that brought you there and forgets about things at the beginning. Now let's switch back to Google Analytics 4, getting back to that point of a user source or a user event and a session event. Is user events are actually by default first click. So if you go in and you want to see what's the user source that came through, you'll actually see by default what was the first thing that brought that user to your website. And if you look at session source, that's going to look at the last click by default, like we have before, that last thing that brought that person there.
Are there other differences between the attribution models available inside of GA4 versus what we're used to? So as you mentioned, by default, the event is last click. I'm sorry, the session event is last click and user event is first click, right?
Yes. And then for like the general, like overall attribution model, besides for those two, so the ones that specifically say user and the one that specifically say session, then there's like the overall model that Google Analytics 4 is using. You are able to go in and select what you want that overall model to be. And that overall model to be, the cool part about it is when you change it, it actually goes retroactive as well, which is something typically with Google Analytics, when you ever made a change, it wouldn't go back. Now, out of the box, the model that Google sort of wants is the data-driven attribution. For those people who are involved with Google Ads and the attribution models that are there, the main attribution model and the one that's recommended to go with is data-driven. And that means that the model is determined by the Google or the machine itself. It's a combination of all different models, and based off what the data is, they're going to create a model that looks the best. So that's like what the default model is. But within there, you can go and also select other models. You can choose last click, or there's the option of ads preferred last click, which will give attribution specifically to sources that are ad based. And it's kind of funny because that's kind of like Google trying to push the Google ads, I guess. And give point to that. Now, there were other attribution models that people are familiar with, maybe not everyone used, but there's the concept of linear or first click, time decay, which means you give more credit to the thing that's closer and less credit to the thing that was further away. Position-based attribution, which was pretty cool. I like that the most, where you give most of the credit to the beginning and the end, and then you give the rest of the credit. I think it's like 40% to the first source, 40% to the last source, and then you split up 20% to everything in the middle. That's another recent announcement that came, is that these models of first click, linear, time decay, and position based are all going away and no longer will be available in both Google Analytics 4 and Google Ads. What will remain are data-driven attribution, last click, and ad preferred's last click. But the only caveat to that is if there are certain things like we just spoke about before, where there's like a user event and a session event, you will still get access to first click attribution through those user event attributes.
Yeah, it's a little frustrating that they're taking those options away. And, not to be conspiratorial, but there's reason to believe that the data-driven model is favorable to Google Ads specifically, and ad-based attribution. And for those that are curious about why is this so important, unless you're selling a $5 widget that's an impulse buy, most likely your customer's journey, your website visitor's journey is going to have multiple touch points. So someone learns about you from it's organic search. They read an article, and then a couple of weeks later, they saw an ad. They came to the site. Maybe they signed up to the email list, et cetera, right? So you have multiple touch points, and you want to know, especially when it comes to allocating your advertising budgets, of like which channels are working, what who's driving me the best customers, et cetera. So you want to know how to give credit to an event, to a transaction, to a conversion, and knowing which channels are driving new customers versus which channels are the closers, so to speak, that actually get somebody to convert, and which channels are assisting. It's all important. So having multiple views into it is critical, as opposed to just relying on last click, which basically only gives credit to the last channel, which oftentimes would be remarketing or email, but that's not necessarily, certainly not driving you new customers, right? So if you look at just last click, you're missing everything at the top of the funnel, and vice versa. You may get a lot of top funnel traffic from channels that don't necessarily convert, but introduce people to your brand, introduce people to your offering, and then you need other channels to convert them. So looking at multiple perspectives, I think, is important.
Yeah. And I'll give you like a real life example that I just had this past week. We're doing SEO for an e-commerce business. They're a tile company. And, they have an external consultant. I don't know if I'd call him a fractional CMO, but, he's definitely a consultant. And, he pulled up Google Analytics and he's like, man, I'm looking at your work. Your traffic has gone, the traffic that you have caused due to SEO is amazing. But when I look at the revenue, there hasn't really been much of a change. If anything, year over year, it looks like the revenue is down. So right away, when someone tells me that they looked into Google Analytics and they say, oh, revenue's down, or they come to an assumption, I'm like, hey, have you been really looking at everything? And I was right. He was looking at the generic report in analytics that said last click. And that means that I'm only judging your SEO efforts based off of if they brought the person right at the end. But what about all the times that SEO and organic Google search brought the person in the middle of the journey, or where it really counts at the beginning of the journey? And when I went to like the multi-attribution reports and things like that, obviously turning it on, you see, on the contrary, we were actually causing a growth of revenue from 30 to 35% year over year during certain time periods. So it's just important that you have to look at things in multiple ways. I like to say that, if we just looked at last click all the time, like there would be no such thing as like social media ads, because a lot of the time social media ads happen in the middle of the funnel. And, if you're just judging everything at the back end, you may cut things that are really helping.
Right. Yeah. And especially, when it comes to things like remarketing, retargeting, those are bottom of funnel. And by definition, they're not new user acquisition, but they get all the credit in a last click model. Let's talk about some of the other Google products. We mentioned Google Ads, of course, and Google Search Console as it relates to organic search, and also Tag Manager. Anything that users need to know about as it relates to how GA4 integrates with those? Is it pretty similar to what we're used to? What are your thoughts there?
Sure. So I think the big one to talk about is going to be Google Ads. So it's this sort of a warning for some people that there's two ways when it comes to Google Ads to set up conversions in Google Ads. One is that you create that conversion in Google Analytics and then you import it. But that means you're going against the rules of Google Analytics. And based off of the rules that you have in Google Analytics, that's how it's going to attribute sales to your Google Ads. The second way, and the better way, is to actually set up conversions directly from Google Ads. And when that happens, then you have, it's based off of the rules of Google Ads, and it's usually more accurate. So these days, most Google Ads experts are recommending that you set up your conversions directly in Google Ads. You use the special Google Ads tags in order to set up the conversions and not import it from GA4. So so it's important. Like, you listen to this episode and feel like, okay, let's first check out our Google Ad, program. What are we doing? Now, if your analytics are set up through Universal Analytics, then you got a problem, right? Number one, you got to make sure that you either go ahead and create conversions through GA4 or through Google Ads itself. Now, if let's say you decide that you want to go ahead and use the conversions through GA4 itself, then typically, like I said, it uses like the attribution model, but recently Google responded that they are going to be using like a data-driven model within even Google Analytics events. And therefore, it might give a better idea of what's going to happen within Google Ads itself. But bottom line is, even with sort of that improvement, it's highly recommended that you want to set up those conversions directly. And the cool thing about Google Ads is you could technically do both. I know some people who do side by side, where on one hand, you're tracking purchases natively through the Google Ads conversion, and you're also tracking it through Google Analytics, and you can bring both of those conversions into the Google Ads platform to look at. The only thing you have to be careful is you don't want to make both of those a primary conversion, because then that might be duplicating the amount of data that you're going to be getting. So, let's say there's a $50 purchase. If you set them both up as primary, it might say, oh, you made $100 in revenue, when that's not the case. So rather, you want to ideally put the Google Ads conversion as the primary, and you want to make the Google Analytics conversion secondary, and therefore Google will only be looking at the primary as for optimization purposes. But if you want to look at how the secondary conversions are doing as well, you can.
Interesting. I think I saw that Google is actually not allowing you to set your conversion window. So how long you look back at, let's say somebody came to the site, how long after that does an event that happens, a purchase, a conversion, get attributed back to that original visit or first event. I saw that they're not allowing you to configure that in Google Ads anymore. That's only going to be configurable in GA4. Have you seen something like that?
I think I read something about that. I don't know the details, but today, while I was going through, you can configure that in Google Analytics itself. And it's similar to what we're used to in Google Ads in order to configure that type frame.
Yeah. It seems like they're giving you a 30-day, 60-day, and 90-day option. That's controversial in my opinion. I think that sometimes you need shorter attribution windows depending on the user journey.
Yeah, I agree. That's why flexibility is nice. And like we're saying, although GA4 in some ways is creating all these new opportunities, but certain areas they are tightening down and aren't as flexible.
Right.
Which can be very frustrating.
How does GA4 handle cross-device tracking or attribution, multi-device attribution? So someone came on the computer and then they came again on their phone. How does Google know that it's the same person, et cetera?
So when it comes to cross-device tracking in GA4, GA4 is automatically going to look at certain things, which you actually have to opt in. So it actually clearly states, like, do you want us to connect people's Google user IDs? And you can opt into that, opt out of that. You have a couple of options like that. Another thing that you can do, which was available in Universal Analytics, is that you can tie a person's user ID. So for example, let's say someone comes to a store and they check out and then they get an account and their account number is 5432. You can go ahead and input or import that 5342 number into Google Analytics. And therefore, no matter, let's say that person then goes and signs in on their mobile device, Google Analytics will see, oh, 5342, I know that 5342 is on both of these devices. I know that 5342 is on both of these devices, and therefore it will combine the session and realize that it's one person. Now, in Universal Analytics, in order to see and get access to some of that cool reporting around a custom user ID, you actually have to create a new view or a new property in order to see that. In GA4, you're able to access all of that user ID level reporting naturally and there. So when you think about it, Google Analytics is kind of creating this picture of an individual using a couple, data points, IP addresses, cookies, their Google ID, and then user ID as well. So the more options, the more like hooks that you can provide with Google Analytics, the better it can get a better perspective and picture of that whole cross-device journey that people take.
And you mentioned the opt-in. I think that some of those opt-in options as it relates to tracking and identifying users have some privacy concerns related to them. And my understanding is that just generally privacy and GDPR is one of the big pieces or I don't know if it's the motivation behind the switch to GA4 or just one of the components of the new philosophy, but we are moving it towards a privacy focused world, and the legislation is requiring it. So just be cognizant of the jurisdictions that you're in and what kind of user tracking consent you have on your website, and making sure that you match that with whatever setting you're doing inside of GA4 in your setup.
Right. And, I've worked on a couple of projects specifically when it comes to GDPR, and, based on if someone, agrees or disagrees, then you stop firing the cookies. If they agree, the cookies can continue going and you can track that person. If the person doesn't agree, then you don't track that person. So cool part about GA4 is for some of these, like, more privacy related tracking options, you can actually go in and they have a list of countries, and you can actually opt out of those at the country level, which is really cool. That wasn't by Universal Analytics. And just getting to your point of like GA4, that's also, like you said, one of the main reasons that we have GA4 is because as cookie-less measurement comes to fruition, that means that we can't track people as much as we can before because they opt out, right? So therefore, there's going to be these big holes in the story, right? Like, I know that 500 people came to the website, but I can only see 300 of them. So what are the other 200 people doing? And GA4 has introduced, machine learning and, behavioral and conversion modeling that will allow us to get a better picture. It's funny because, I'm sure you have clients like this. Everyone for years has been looking at Google Analytics and traditional Universal Analytics as like the Bible, right? Whatever it says is 1,000% true. And if something is off, there's something wrong. But I always like to tell people that Universal Analytics, even that, you couldn't have always taken it like it's the Bible. I would say look at it as like a 90% accurate picture. And I think people are going to have to get used to this concept that as we get more into like a privacy aware world, the amount of data that we're going to get is going to decrease. And therefore we are going to have to rely on modeling and kind of, filling in that picture. And just like we know that there's the possibility of the Mona Lisa and cutting out a circle and then getting a machine learning to fill in the middle and it be almost accurately correct of what it was originally without it knowing what was going on, we can assume that these models, well, it may not be 100% accurate, but it's going to be able to start filling in the picture of those areas where we don't really know that, about those visitors and those users. And with the modeling, we can get a better idea of what the true picture is.
So if I can restate what I think you're saying, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, previously in Google Analytics, we had visibility into, let's say, 95% of the traffic that's on our website, and that was being reported to us. Now in GA4, with greater compliance around privacy and tracking, you're only seeing, let's say, 70% or 80% of site visitors, and then Google is modeling, predicting what the other 20% kind of behaved like based on the sampling that it did. Is that right?
Yes. In Universal Analytics, we didn't have that modeling option. Now we do. Now, I think you can still opt out of it. You can say like, I want modeling on, I don't want it on. But the point is now it's there and you kind of need it because as more people and more states in the United States have requirements, you're going to need those tools and options in order to get an idea of what's going on.
Yeah. And the California privacy regulations are almost identical to what came out of Europe. So it's no longer something that we can ignore here stateside. You do need to pay attention to it and implement compliant behaviors on your site, or there are penalties to pay. Let's talk about the AI capabilities of GA4. Is there anything, you mentioned the modeling as it relates to kind of stitching together user behavior and understanding behavior across devices. Any other AI capabilities that we should know about that's available in GA4 out of the box?
So I am unaware of any other AI sort of in your face things, but I feel like something that's a little bit related is the audience building capability where like and that audience building capability is really a tool that helps for Google Ads. But even without that, it's just to kind of get an idea, a very clear idea. And this kind of fits in with funnel reporting. Funnel reporting in Universal Analytics was very much, You wanted to see like what were the steps that people took in order to take an action. And it was very clunky. It was all URL based, but now you really can like craft this very unique journey very easily and clearly. Like a person who came from specifically Facebook ads and they came to this page and they clicked on this button and then they went and they selected that category. Like such a complex journey, but you can go ahead and actually define that. And the cool thing about this is where it goes outside of Google Ads is I could create an event based off of that. So imagine if someone created this like very unique journey, and then those people are like the best people that you like to follow. To kind of track that person in the old analytics would have been very difficult. But now I can create that custom audience and fire an event when that happens. And now when I go into my Google Analytics reports and I want to see, okay, I want to see high quality users based on that special trajectory events that I've done, I can easily see that in my Google Analytics reports. And that's like so cool, so powerful. So that just opens up. So I know that's not AI, but it's so much more than what we had before.
It feels like AI because it gives you those added powers.
I guess so. Yeah.
That is pretty cool. You talked earlier about the timeline of when UA is being deprecated, and also the availability of the data in UA for an additional year. But it doesn't mean that you're going to be tracking in UA for another year. So for people who didn't listen to their fractional CMO or their agency to implement GA4 a year ago, how are they going to do year-over-year comparisons or any sort of trend data trending? Is there a way to import old data or UA data into GA4 to have that historical trend?
Great question. I think everyone wished that would have happened, but that's not the case. So let's break it down on what are the options that you have. So let's first talk about Universal Analytics data, right? It's going to stop. What are we going to do with that data? So at this point, you can take screenshots. You can export data as Excel or CSVs, or you can also export it through the API. And that means that they do have an API. It's complex. I have a feeling that there are going to be companies or products or services that are going to make it easy to export that data, and then, for example, stick it into, let's say, BigQuery, which is like Google's data warehousing feature. I believe that if you have Google Analytics 360, which means the paid version, they do have that option of BigQuery automatically. But for the regular, billions of users that don't have that, you can use the API. But like I said, hopefully there will be some sort of concept. So let's think about it this way. If you do use the API and you take that data and put it into some sort of warehouse, now let's go to Universal Analytics. Universal Analytics does have a native connector to BigQuery. So that means you can automatically export the data into BigQuery. And I'm going to add an extra thing here. You might want to, because even in Google Analytics 4, it only keeps data for 14 months. And by default, it's 2 months. So even those people who have set up GA4, I think we'll include some links of where to look. But bottom line is you got to go there and switch it to 14 months because by default it's 2 months. So think about it. Even in GA4 where you have a 14-month cap, even there, if data is really, really important to you, you might want to go ahead and export that in BigQuery anyhow. So then in that sort of scenario, if you've got your data from GA4 in BigQuery and you have your data from Universal Analytics in BigQuery, you may now be able to compare it. But remember, the way that things are called in UA is different than the way that things are called in GA4. So having to compare those two, I can imagine, will be a little bit of a feat. So what's the moral of the story? It's going to be difficult, very difficult, but it is possible if you really have to.
Well, that tip around changing your setting from 2 months to 14 months, I think just that alone made listening for listeners who made it this far into the episode, made it worthwhile, because that I did not know, and that is huge. What about if you're using Looker, what was Google Data Studio? I think that has a little bit more kind of like an in-between in functionality between what you can get manually from Google Analytics versus what you would get by the API in BigQuery. Is that right?
So using Looker, you're going to get access to the data, but remember, it's going to query from the data that's available. So you're saying if you connected.
So if you're using Looker, you have access to the API, the same data that the API makes available, or you get access to the same, basically what you would be able to do with a CSV.
Right. You get access to that data, but once again, it's only the data that's there, right? It's not like it ingests the data and like saves it. It's querying the live data. Related to Looker or Data Studio, a nice advantage of Google Analytics 4 is its explorations reporting, which is kind of like a Data Studio report within GA4 itself. A lot of people don't like it because it's kind of intimidating. Like there's a lot of things in how you build it. But honestly, once you get used to the tools, having that sort of native Data Studio or Looker within GA4 allows you to do some pretty cool things and to do some nice comparisons and build a lot of like custom reports. So, one man's joy can be another man's sadness. But I think that, if you are into data, it definitely provides some cool options.
Yeah, it sounds like a lot of consultants are going to have a lot of work for some time to help business owners manage this, which on the one hand, maybe it's a good thing because like I said earlier, it gives you more powers than you had before. But, it definitely feels like some of the things are being taken away, especially from a self-serve perspective. So let's get like really tactical. And, if I'm a site owner, I haven't implemented it yet. What are the first steps I need to take to get started with GA4?
So if you log into your Universal Analytics right now, there's actually a banner that pops up and kind of pushes you to do GA4. Now it will kind of like step-by-step convert your Universal Analytics into Google Analytics 4. So it doesn't mean that it's importing the data. It just means like the conversions that you have set up or some of the events you have set up. It's going to do its best to try to push that in and match your settings as much as possible. Now, I still feel like you should get a consultant or understand exactly what's happening. In my perfect world, I would set up a brand new GA4 and set it up from scratch, because when that like conversion happens, you don't necessarily know what they're going to do. But the idea is that that's going to happen. And honestly, if you don't even press that button, I do believe that July 1st, Google's automatically going to set up a GA4 property for everyone anyhow. So steps would really be to go ahead and either do that conversion and get someone to check it out, or to go ahead and create a GA4 property. And there's a lot of out-of-the-box features. And obviously, the most important thing for you will be is to figure out what are those events that you were tracking before. What are the conversions or goals that you were checking before, and to make sure those are set up properly. And I think if you do that at a base point, you're going to be okay.
Very cool. And are there any key features or reports that we should know about right off the bat, and any kind of top level recommendations that you have?
Well, the nice thing about GA4 is any report that you look at, you can actually edit. So, typically now when you're looking at Universal Analytics, you have a lot of columns, right? And in analytic language, it's called metrics. The rows are called dimensions. And in these metrics are these columns, and those are more quantitative dimensions, or the rows are going to be more qualitative. But those columns, sometimes they get in the way. Like, I don't need that. I don't need that. If you click on the pencil in the top right corner, you can go ahead and really customize the view to make sure that it looks and you have the things that you want. So the idea here is that even if you see a report and it's not exactly the way that you want, go ahead and customize it. And let's say you like it one way, but the other department likes another way, you can actually duplicate the report and set it up as well. So, you're going to be looking at your typical like source reports, where did the traffic come from? And, did it complete any conversions? Those sort of reports are going to be there. And then, your typical e-commerce reports where, revenue and products and, coupon codes, depending on what you're using, those are all going to be there as well. So A lot of those reports are there, right out the box. But when you start going a little bit deeper, you're like, oh, that thing that I liked isn't there anymore. For example, here's like a really big bugger for a lot of people. On Universal Analytics, on the top of your report, there's usually some sort of like chart, right? To show you like the traffic going up and down. Now there's a little cool feature in the corner of that where you could look at that automatically, like from a day perspective, or if it's going to make it like in a month perspective or in a year perspective. And like, we love that, right? That's really easy. When you go into GA4 now and it's got that chart, but that chart's like half the window, and then there's like some other chart there, so you can't even see the information properly. But even then, there is no button to go ahead and click to see, days, months, or years, and it can be very comfortable. Now, of course, you can go into the exploration and build it and do what you need to, but man, that could be extremely frustrating when that happens. So that's why I feel like you got to give it time.
Is there a workaround for that, or you just write to your favorite Google product manager to get that product updated?
I think we got to set up these petitions all over the place. So the workaround is going into the exploration report and like going into that builder and build the report that you want. But that ability to do it really quickly, it's not going to be. So the idea is everything that you need is pretty much there, but the number of clicks to get there is going to be a lot more than you're used to.
Yeah.
It's like when you're driving to a location and you've never been there before, you better add in like 30 minutes just in case. These days it's different with Waze, but you're used to like getting on and like finding that thing in 5 minutes. You might need to set aside a little bit more time, especially when July 1st comes along. Because even me, like I've got GA4 set up for like my personal properties, but I'm not looking at that now because I want to, eke out every last moment of Universal Analytics.
Same. It's very on brand for Google, both the fact that they often pull the rug out from people and just deprecate products that people love to use, but also they release updates and improvements to products over time. So what you see today will likely be vastly improved upon over the coming months and years. As frustrating as it is, they are giving us a really powerful free tool. So we kind of just have to, play along with their rules, or we can, pay for another tool like Mixpanel or et cetera. There's other options out there.
And Moshe, there is a page that Google has where wherever there's like an update to GA4, like, oh, we released this new thing, they do announce it there. So I'm sure we can leave a link for listeners for that. But, it's good to check back in. The simple landing page report didn't exist a couple months ago. And then they said, okay, no, people need that. We're going to add it as a standard. So you're right. Things are coming all the time. Check in on that. And then obviously follow your favorite, digital marketing people online so that you can, also see like what's happening when it comes to GA4.
Yeah, absolutely. Any common mistakes or pitfalls that we should watch out for that you've seen so far? You've worked with a bunch of clients in installing their GA4s and potentially migrating over. Anything to pay attention to?
Yeah. So besides for that 14 and 2 month thing, the way that we track events in Universal Analytics versus Google Analytics 4 is very different. In Universal Analytics, when you set an event, and let's use an example, so we're not talking so theoretical. I wanted to track people clicking on this video. And let's say it's a video of Moshe in his garden. So for people who don't know, Moshe is a gardener and he does really great work. That's his secret. So this is the big reveal. So it's a video of Moshe in his garden. And I want to track every time someone clicks on that video. So now there were, for every event that you set up, there were 3 fields or 3 data points that you could track. It's called category, label, and action. So imagine when someone clicks on this, the category would be videos. The action would be play. And the label would be Moshe in the garden to know what video it was. Coming along to GA4, it's blasted this construct away. And you are no longer limited to 3 attributes or parameters. You can add as many as you want to any event. And obviously you don't want to do too many, but you can customize it. You don't have to fit it within those 3. It could be, we could call it a type of video. And then, the value of that would be a cooking video. We could add, color of the screen, red. Like, the point is, I wouldn't necessarily track those things, but you're not limited and you can create it. So when people are moving their events from traditional analytics to GA4, you kind of have to open your mind and say, what are the possibilities? What is the nomenclature that I want to use in order to better understand what's going on? And it really provides you with so many different options. And now, any of those data points that you're going to track, if you make it a custom dimension or a custom metric, you'll be able to pull it into your report. So just let's give like one other example. Let's say you're a nonprofit and people come along and they can donate to multiple charities, right? They could donate to, helping the needy, helping children, helping widows, right? And we want to keep track of which one they chose. So I would, let's say call the event donation. But when they do that donation, we're going to call it donation category. And there will, do they choose needy? Now let's actually want to break it down inside a report and see all the people that came from Facebook ads, how many of them chose needy? So you would have to take that parameter and set it up as a custom dimension, and then you can pull that in your report. Keep in mind, you can only create, I'm trying to remember if it's 20 or 30 custom dimensions. So even though you're grabbing all that data and all those events, if you want to pull them into the reports in an easy way, you're limited to 20, kind of like how we were limited to conversions. So you have to keep that in mind and well. So I know this is very tactical, but the point is, let's get back to the basis is you can track so much more, and don't just copy and paste what you did before, but really think through what's the best way that we can take advantage and really track the things that we need, because we're no longer limited when it comes to event tracking.
Thanks for sharing that. So I'm actually going to drop a link to, Danny has a crash course for GA4 that he recorded and is available. So I'm going to put a link to that. He didn't ask me to do that, and I was the one asking him to come on the show to tell us about GA4. But I highly recommend that. I want to shift gears for just a couple minutes towards the end here. We started podcasting just about the same time, and I wanted to ask you about your experience doing that so far. What's the biggest surprise for you as a new podcaster? What has stood out to you?
Well, I think first thing is just getting started seems like this huge mountain, right? It's like, how am I going to do it? How do I even interview people? That is like very overbearing. I think it took me a year to like plan everything out, just to get started. But once you actually start, it's like, why wasn't I doing this more? Like, this is so much fun. It's really not that bad. It's really easy. And it's just been very, very enjoyable.
Yeah, I wouldn't say it's easy, but it's definitely enjoyable. And I spent over a year from when I registered the domain and created the name of the podcast to when I actually launched it was over a year. And a lot of that same kind of fears and uncertainty before starting. And I've shared it on the podcast that I started with a commitment to myself to do 20 episodes. And that was like, okay, we're going to get over the pod fade hurdle of, most people stop after 7 or 8 episodes. We'll get to 20 and then we can assess it. And it's been an unbelievable journey. Just the amount of learnings that I've been able to accumulate speaking to such smart and accomplished people, and the access that you have is sometimes very surprising, where I'll reach out to somebody who's way out of my league, and in my mind, I'm like, for sure they're going to ignore me or say no, and they come on, and I've had such amazing guests and continue to have amazing conversations. So that's been for me a big learning.
And Moshe, just to add to that, I feel like I think you and I talk about imposter syndrome a lot, but speaking to a lot of people here, and kind of people who I look up to, and maybe they seem like you can't even touch them, but during these podcasts, you realize that they're very, everyone's very similar. They're really not that scary, and you find out things about people that you never knew, like their background and what they struggled with, and just makes them more human. And I love it because it kind of evens that playing field. I think with age, and you also kind of realize that a little bit more, but just interacting with people, especially people, your mentors, people that you look up to, and realizing that you're really not that different, that helps a lot as well.
Yeah, everybody's human. The other surprising thing for me was just the amount of time that it takes to put together. I thought it would be a couple hours a week, and it turned out to be a lot more. Thankfully, I've since starting found a really great production editing team that I'm really grateful for, and they've been able to take a lot off my plate. But it still is a lot of work and preparing and reviewing, editing, etc. Has that been your case as well? I know that you have a pretty well-oiled machine when it comes to production.
The area that takes me a lot of time is really like the promotion afterwards. It's tough, right? Deciding like, when do you announce the episode? And, we know this, right? Sometimes you announce it on LinkedIn and then the post just nothing happens to it. And, how much do I let people know when I put a video snippet on LinkedIn? Do I push the podcast, or is it more about the content on its own? So I feel like a lot of these, like, it's just head games of like, what's too much, what's too little? Do you get that out? So obviously those types of things I'm doing more myself, and I don't have the team to do. And, that does take a lot of mental bandwidth. Yeah.
So Harry Stebbings from 20VC, which is a fantastic podcast, and he's been doing it for years and years. So he recommends that you spend as much time on promotion distribution as you do on production. And it sounds obvious, but it's actually really difficult to do. So it's much easier to sit there focused on, writing the best questions beforehand and editing it so that there's no ums or ahs, and it sounds perfect. But, reaching out to people to notify them about it, getting the podcast spread as widely as possible, obviously is critical to reach that audience. If you're looking to monetize, if you're looking to grow, that's not necessarily been my focus. I'm curious from your perspective, is it, are you doing it as a way to promote your business? Has it been successful in driving new leads or new clients for your business?
So the way that we're approaching it is it's like a content generation machine. My business, which is Optidge, a full service digital marketing agency, we, most of the business that we get are referral based. So for us, it was like, okay, we need to up our content generation, our organic sort of marketing. So the foundation of Optidge, as well as a lot of the other initiatives that we do, whether it's through our courses or other things, it's a lot about mentorship and helping people. So naturally, it's like, okay, this is the type of content that we want to spread out. Now, it wasn't, some people take the podcast route of like, I need to interview, my potential customers or clients. And a lot of people do that. In this case, we didn't really take that angle. And I still have to see if that's going to be a successful route. So, we chose a way to produce content, interesting content, to get our name more out there, which is kind of like 2 steps away from the end client. I have one, significant success story where a guy I know, he's here in Houston. He's a really interesting marketer. We've known each other for 12 years, but we've never worked together at all. And I saw, like, after a couple of podcast episodes, I see that he subscribed to my YouTube channel. He subscribed to my newsletter. And then I get this email from him. Hey, we're changing vendors. I'd love, potentially for us to work together. So it was kind of like a very organic way. But to me, it was kind of like, this is a guy who I've been in front of for 12 years, or at least I thought I was in front of him for 12 years, didn't notice me. But suddenly I'm starting to produce content, get myself out there. And that was enough to push him to move forward. So I'm imagining that I'm planting those seeds in many ways, and who knows where it's going to come from. And that's why, right? You got to keep going, right? Yes, getting to 20 is so cool and so important, but got to keep the machine going as much as possible.
Well, you got to get to 200 and 2000. It's funny that you mentioned interviewing your potential customers or clients, because that's originally when I was thinking about the format as a business generation tool for growth.co, interviewing your potential clients is a known tactic when it comes to podcasting. You interview the guest, and then afterwards you have that warm conversation of hey, we talked about all these things you're struggling with. We can help you with that. But then I quickly realized that the stories that I want to tell are the people that could have been my customer a year ago. And that quickly changed. So that was not the case for me. That the clients that I work with are typically, early stage, just around either pre-product market fit or just found product market fit and pre-scaling. And the stories that we're telling are really the experiences of those that have already achieved some form of success and learning from them. So definitely shifted gears in that way, and just interesting how it played out. But I'm loving it so far and learning so much, and hopefully my listeners are as well, and enjoying that adventure with me.
But the way I look at it is, I love how you positioned yourself, because you're rubbing shoulders with your target market's like future people. So when people like look at Moshe Poltrak or Growth.co, it's kind of like, okay, like he really knows startup space. He speaks to those people. He has that experience. He's worked with it. So like I said, it might not be one step away, but it's 2 steps away, but I think it's even more powerful. So I love that it's where, the direction of where your podcast is going. I enjoy it. I listen to it all the time. So yeah, just keep it up. It's really, really great.
Appreciate that. And I've mentioned to you in private that I was thinking about creating another podcast for the earlier stage, but we're not going to go there just yet. I've got too much on my plate, but that would be a separate podcast, and we talk to much earlier stage companies. Danny, thank you so much for this really tactical lesson. I've learned a lot, and I'm sure the audience has as well. We're going to share all those links that we talked about in the show notes, as well as the link to your course on GA4, which is short but really tactical and covers everything that people need to know about this important new tool for marketers, for any startup founders, or really anybody that's got a website and wants to know what people are doing on that website. So beyond that, anything else you want to share with us, or any way that people can be of help to you?
Check out my podcast, The Digital Marketing Mentor. We interview interesting marketers about their mentorship journey, who are the people in their lives who influence them, and how they influencing others. And then we sprinkle in some good digital marketing talk as well. So if that's of your interest, check it out at thedmmentor.com, or you can find it wherever you get your podcasts.
Absolutely. And I'm loving the podcast. And I was a guest on there, which some listeners may know because we released a preview of that. So definitely recommend checking out that podcast, The Digital Marketing Mentor, wherever you love to listen. Thank you, Danny, and stay in touch. We'll talk again soon.
Yes. Thanks for having me.